smile on their face when I am meeting them, so I feel so welcome here. And regarding the former two speakers, they were talking about, I can understand Assamese because I am from Odisha, though I don't speak. I'll try to speak, of course. Now I'm learning Bangla because I'm the vice chancellor of Hindi University West Bengal, so I'm learning the writing of the language, Bangla. So after that, probably I can also learn Assamese, but I can understand being Odia, so whatever they were speaking. And their lectures, they were very important. They were talking about how this institute has been touching lives. People, empowering them, the subaltern groups, the marginal groups, the sections of the society, irrespective of their caste or gender or anything, or the tribes that they belong to. They have been empowering them, and they talked about that. And I was very happy that you people are actually in a very subdued way, without doing any much of publicity of the institution. You are actually going to the grassroots. Today when Dr. Durjati brought me here from the guest house, he said that we didn't bring the marginal groups to us, we are going to them. We are going to meet them, we are going to work with them. And then I was rather happy that yes, this is the way you should, meet the marginalized groups. This reminds me about my work. When we did this MA in folk literature, MA in folklore and culture studies, the diploma program was designed in the year 2008 when of course I didn't know Dr. Dujati. And then we had one block on language death, the dying languages of the world. Initially in the world there were 6 lakh languages, and today there are only 6,000 languages. What happened to rest of the languages then? They died a natural death in the absence of anyone preserving, documenting those languages. So in relation to that, language death and language preservation, I visited many dying language groups of the world. I went to, let me speak. So I visited many places, like I went to Madagascar, I went to so many tribal communities in India and otherwise. And then it's very difficult to convince the dying language groups, the people, that your language is an endangered language, it's a dying language. So when I went to the Congo tribal groups about Kui language, I went to the tribal district that I belong to in Odisha, and I told them that yours is an endangered language, it's a dying language, and they were very, very angry with me. They said, okay, this Delhi person, this Delhi wali is here and she's telling out she's a dying language. They actually, they didn't entertain me, they didn't talk to me. So I took some time to engage with them. I tried to become a part of them. I stayed with them for some time, talking to them, eating with them, and dressing up the way they dress up and speaking in the language that they speak. I also learned that language. And then after a few days, they engaged with me. They told me their folk tales, their folk songs, their music. They sang those songs to me, and I recorded those. So, when you engage with theorists, research scholars teaching in IGNOU for so many years, and then going to Delhi University, JNU, Jamia, kind of important elite institutions, and talking to those scholars, that has been a very different experience. But coming to the grassroots, talking to the marginalized groups, the communities who are actually the subaltern groups, talking to them, it's a different ball game altogether. So I have both kinds of experience. I was born and brought up in a tribal district in Odisha, that is Kandhamal district. I spent the first 20 years of my life there. Then after that I got junior research fellowship, then I went to do PhD in Shantiniketan, then I came to Delhi. I taught in Delhi for 19 years, and now I am in Kolkata. So I have both the kinds of experiences, engaging with elite institutions, scholars, professors, and working with important and interesting people, and also going to the grassroots and meeting people and talking to them, taking interviews with them. So I took interviews with the last speakers of many dying language groups of Odisha, and also I went to many other countries, many other states. From Kashmir to Kanyakumari I travelled, and then I did my research. That is how I designed the MA program in Folklore and Culture Studies, and today the program has 15,000 students, and your state, Assam, is also teaching that. Dr. Durjati was telling me yesterday, a lot of students from that MA and PG diploma in folk literature, they come to him, they engage with him. So I'm very glad, and There are a couple of courses where we have taken Northeastern literature massively. Like there is one course, Tribes of India, Identity, Culture and Lore, that is MFC 003 or 4. We have taken so many Northeastern tribes and their lifestyles and their strategies of survival, the kind of life they have. So we have critically observed their lifestyles and then we have presented those in the form of academic programs. Being a serious academician and a professor and a teacher throughout my life, I always feel that if you want to serve the society, if you want to contribute something to the society, it can be possible by motivating the next generation, the younger generation. So I have always tried to do that. Youngsters like Dr. Durjati and many of his age group, many people have been working with me. I try to give them important work and then I appreciate their work and then I try to also engage much younger people like IGNOU students. They are from 20 years to my eldest student is 97 years. My youngest student is 18 years. So my range is that much. I teach people from 18 years to 97 years. So for example, in this PG Diploma in Folklore Studies, there is one course MFCP 005, which is a project. And one doctor from Safdarjung Hospital, Delhi, it's an important hospital, he is one of my students. Then some professors from Nassau School of Drama, they are my students. So people who are so well established in their own fields of study, doctors, engineers, professors, all kinds of people are my students. So I do not restrict myself to be an English teacher. Though I am trained in British literature and American literature, I have been teaching American and English and British literature kind of things forever, but also I simultaneously work with folklore, culture studies, indigenous studies and then Indian knowledge systems, Hindu studies. My most recent book, Hindu Studies, Foundations and Frameworks, it's published. I'm going to give it to Dr. Durjati for the library. Please borrow it from him and read. And the second volume of this book is coming, Hindu Studies, Texts and Contexts. In this book, I am not talking about Hinduism per se. I am talking about the liberal secularism that Hindu literary pedagogy is. Hindu literary pedagogy, the texts of Hindu literary pedagogy, how they can have a parallel study with Sufism, with Islam, with Christianity, with all kinds of religious scriptures which are taken as literary texts. This is the only way to introduce these texts to our next generation. You ask them to go to a temple or go to a mosque, probably they will not like to do that because they don't have that kind of patience or they do not engage with the kind of thinking patterns or the kind of engagements that the elder generation has. Then how to introduce these important value systems and knowledge systems to them? Probably through research and course material. Any book can die a natural death if the book is published and then it doesn't go to the next generation. It will be shelved for some time and then people will forget the book. So this book, Sita, my poetry book, I'm going to also give it to Dr. Durjati for the library. You can collect it from him and read. The book was published in 2014, 10 years back. I have taken the character Sita from the Ramayana and then I have deconstructed Sita. I have placed her vis-a-vis contemporary men and women. I see a Sita-ness in all of us, even in men sitting out there, in their patience, their perseverance, and their interest to learn something new, their connection with ecology and environment, and then their progressive and independent attitude. These are the attitudes of my kind of Sita. My Sita is not a brooding, crying, complaining woman. She is not crying over her destiny when she is left alone in the forest. Rather, she takes life in her stride. In the Valmiki ashram, when she is left alone for the second time during her pregnancy, she makes best use of the time. She is a teacher in the Valmiki ashram. She teaches important value systems and texts to the ashramites. She cooks for the ashram children. She heals with her touch the animals and to the environment. So my Sita is an eco-feminist. She is an environmentalist. She is a progressive, independent, free-thinking, optimistic woman who has the courage and conviction to take care of her children all by herself in the absence of Lord Ram. And when the children are 13 years old, when the children go back to the father, they are so powerful that they can even defeat Lord Ram and Lakshman and Hanuman and all of them. So I have created a character, a very contemporary Sita, who is like me and you. somebody who takes life in his or her stride. So, and then now this year, the revised version of Sita is coming from Author's Press, and then I have added 5 new cantos, very contemporary 5 new cantos, and with a long introduction, revised introduction. The book is coming maybe next week. Sita, a long narrative poem. So maybe that is another step, a step forward to being Sita or Sita-ness in our society. And with working in IGNOU kind of an university where we have 8.85 million students, and the tribal and the rural and the urban population, if you look at IGNOU, then the ratio is 20 and 80. 80% of the people, the students in IGNOU are working people, or they are in villages, they are in tribal communities, and they are the subaltern groups. And yeah. So working with those kind of people, I have actually learned to work with the subaltern, with the marginal groups. And our students are also from tribal communities. They and almost all our courses, except MA English, BA English courses, almost all our academic programs are bilingual, English and Hindi. And now we are trying to translate our courses to other languages too, many other languages. So we deal with translation. If you look at the National Education Policy, the NEP document, NEP 2020, if you have looked at the document, in the 67 pages document, the word language is used 202 times. So you can imagine how much importance the Government of India is giving to language preservation, to languages, many languages. Fortunately, I came to Hindi University West Bengal last, in January I came here, just 3 months now, and it's a language university. We deal with all the constitutionally approved languages of the country, the 22 languages. Then we deal with many tribal languages, folk and tribal languages which are endangered or dying languages. We deal with them. And then also foreign languages. We are trying to introduce 6 to 7 MA courses in foreign languages. So probably they picked a person like me who is trained in English, but I'm multilingual. I speak in English and Bangla and a little bit of Bangla and Odia and Hindi, and also a couple of foreign languages I have learned. Probably they wanted a language person to work in Hindi University so that I create a coherence between all the languages. Languages are like sisters. They flow into each other. They empower each other. Languages do not have any controversy. One language can never be a predator for another language. One language can never disempower another language. Rather, languages empower each other, and translation is the key. So in the NEP document, we also talk a lot about translation between the languages. We create translation pedagogy. We exchange the texts between each other. A translator is, he brings home the culture. So translation actually empowers the translator to bring home one culture. I have deep and close association with Assam. Many of my research scholars are from Assam. A few years ago, I had come here to Assam Sahitya Sabha for some program. They had invited me as a chief guest. A couple of my students, they were working in folklore and folk life in Assamese literature, and then they talked about so many folk traditions of Assam. Some Assamese writers who were not translated to English. Assamese Sahitya Academy award-winning writers who were not translated to English, but a couple of students came to my university with synopsis on Assamese literature. And then nobody was interested to take them because the texts are Assamese and we are an English department. But I belong to one school of thought which will not dismiss any work. Rather, we have to empower. So I took the students, Assamese students, I took them. They were speaking English because they were MA English students. But the texts that they had selected were Assamese, they were not English. So I gave 6 months time to the student himself. I asked the student to translate the Assamese novels to English, and they actually did it. Within 6 months time, I am a very, very strict guide that way, and I fix timelines like deadlines you have to submit. Dr. Durjit will agree with me. If you have to submit some work, I will keep on reminding you because I am very particular about my deadlines and my timeline. Okay, so the students, they translated the Assamese texts to English, and I published those texts in Delhi. So, now the student had multiple contributions. One, contribution to Assamese literature and folk literature. Next, contribution to translation studies because the texts were translated to English and I published the text. I have publishing house, I have a publishing house there. Also, I'm the advisor of many publishing houses. So I published the texts in English. The third contribution was research. Folklore and folk life in Assamese literature, and then they took some Assamese writers. And at a later stage, when I came to Assam last time, 4-5 years ago, those Sahitya Academy Award winning Assamese writers, they came to me to meet me. They said, ma'am, I'm so grateful, we are so grateful to you that you got our books translated from Assamese to English. I said, I had no other choice because I cannot read Assamese, but I have to take this student. So I met the student, translate into English, I published. I got the texts checked by some very eminent scholars of Assamese literature. I published those. So these are multiple contributions, and this is how probably we have to empower the next generation, help them to translate. Without translation or without using some window languages like Hindi or English or some other window languages, probably it will be difficult for Odia, Bangla and Assamese kind of languages to go beyond the boundaries. But now our aim is to go beyond the boundaries, to be more inclusive, to be more flexible. So inclusivity and flexibility will come only if there is cultural exchange. And cultural exchange is possible only if there is translation, research, and teaching in universities. Many writers are excellent in their own field. They write good books, but nobody gets to know them because they are not taught in universities. They are not taught in schools and colleges. So if you want to empower a writer, translate him or her, get the writer into some syllabus. Some school, college, university, anything, or MPhil, PhD coursework, anywhere. Put the writers in some syllabus, let the next generation read them. Otherwise, the writers will just write and they will perish. With their death, people will forget them. So, in this, if you need my help, I am a senior professor in IGNOU, where we design whole lot of syllabi of many courses and programs. And also, we belong to, I belong to Hindi University, kind of a university where we're going to design 30 MA courses. If you need any kind of help from me, vis-a-vis taking Assamese writers to a global level, then please get in touch with me. Dr. Durjati is here, so take my email from him. Please get in touch with me and I can help you out. Your text, your Assamese literature, the rich cultural heritage that you have, the Northeastern literature, I can help you to take that to a national and an international level. I can get those translated to English and many other foreign languages, and probably I can help Assamese literature with an exposure in an international level. That is one. Now, thank you so much. And now, my engagement with indigenous knowledge systems and Indian knowledge systems is something that in the morning Dr. Durjati requested me to talk to you about that. I've already spoken to you about this book, Hindu Studies Foundations and Frameworks. But when it comes to course designing, I took 4 years leave from IGNOU in December to join Hindi University as a Vice Chancellor. It's called EOL, Extraordinary Leave, Leon it's called. But before leaving IGNOU, my parting gift for IGNOU was a complete course on Hindu Studies and Indian knowledge systems. The title of the course is Stories from Epics, Puranas and Siddhantas. In that I have taken very scientific ideas from our epics and Puranas and Siddhantas. Like, sir, you will be happy to know that I have taken Surya Siddhanta, Pancha Siddhantika, Siddhant Shiromani kind of texts where we talk about Newton and Galileo kind of scientists. How the scientific ideas, before they came to the West, they were already in our Oriental philosophy. They were already in our texts and in our contexts. For example, we have chapters in that course, chapters like geometrical patterns in the Kurukshetra. One chapter is that. I have a science background, though I studied literature from my English honors onwards. So the practical, the geometry has been written, has been drafted in the chapter. I have passed on the course to Dr. Durjati, he can share it with you. Also it's in the e-Gyan course in the website. You can have a look. That Abhimanyu got into the Kurukshetra, into the Chakravyuha, because he has understood half of the geometry, half of the geometrical pattern of the Chakravyuha. So he entered into that. I wrote the story part, then some IIT professor has collaborated with me and he has given the geometrical pattern step by step. The chapter is more like mathematics than literature, if you look at the chapter carefully. So the geometry is given. Now Abhimanyu gets into the Chakravyuha. Then he is surrounded by everyone attacking him from all directions. He is not able to get out of the Chakravyuha because he has not understood the other half of the geometrical pattern. He hasn't understood because his mother fell asleep during the narration by Lord Krishna. So she has not understood the other part of the geometry. This is so scientific, so geometrical, so mathematical. The other part is again given in the geometrical pattern, how to get out of the Chakravyuha. That is also given in a very beautiful geometrical pattern. The chapters are with him. Then at the end of the chapter, again I am writing. So the IIT professor has given the narration of the geometry. The English teacher has given the narration of mythology. So mythology and geometry coming together, presented in a beautiful chapter for the next generation. The next generation will not listen to stories. They will listen to mathematics. They will listen to geometry. They don't have the patience to listen to long stories narrated by us. So we have to give them in small, short reels kind of things. Okay, so a lot of students, they come to study my kind of courses. Like if you read this book, a lot of geometry and mathematics is here. This is not about Hinduism as a religion. This is about Hindu literary pedagogy, which is very scientific. Fundamentally, elementally scientific. It's about that. So the last part of the chapter is once again about our mythology. How in our Hindu mythology, there is a lot of geometry. Then one chapter is on Pushpak Viman and the aviation technology. We are not claiming anywhere that Ravan had an aeroplane. We can't claim that. But the idea, the imagination, the power of imagination was there in our knowledge system, where somebody, whoever wrote that, imagined that some technology will be there one day when something, a vehicle or something can actually fly. The flying technology. And I have taken that from some folk Ramayana. I have read Madhav Kandale's folk Ramayana from this part of the country. I have included that in my book Sita. In the last canto of this, I have talked a lot about Madhav Kandale's folk narrations of the Ramayana. I have read 300 Ramayans when I read this book. I read 300 Ramayans. Most of them are folk Ramayans. Say I read Valmiki and Ramcharitmanas, of course. Then I read a whole lot of folk Ramayans from India and outside. I went to Bali and Indonesia and Sri Lanka, so many countries, Madagascar. And then I got their version of the Ramayana. Everyone claims the Ramayana, not just India. We feel that Ramayana is ours. They will say Ramayana is theirs. So everyone has a copyright and a claim over the Ramayana. Then why to get into any kind of fight? Let everyone have their version of the Ramayana. So I visited, I covered the Ramayana map of the world. You just Google the Ramayana map of the world, you will find the map. It starts from Nepal, it goes to, it covers so many parts of India, then it goes to Sri Lanka. I traveled a lot. For 2 to 3 years I did the research before I wrote this book. I read 300 Ramayans, traveled, went to many countries, took interviews with the Ramayana scholars. Then when I thought that now I'm bursting with ideas, I have to write it down. Then I closed myself in a room for 18 days. I got locked from outside. I used to ask my son, I took EL for 18 days. My son used to lock me from outside and go to the school, and I used to write throughout the day. So in 18 days I completed this book, though I did the research for 3 years. So probably this is how my creative process, the modus operandi of my creative writing is this, that I do a lot of research, I take notes, and then I do some interviews, I Google, then I find scholars, I talk to them. Recently I wrote a book, Karna. It's again a poetry collection, Karna from the Mahabharata. And I did some research on masculinity studies. Gender studies is complete. If you are a teacher of gender studies, then please remember that your teaching will be complete if you teach them feminism, masculinity studies and queer studies, LGBTQ queer studies. Otherwise, your teaching of gender studies is not complete. But many people think gender studies is feminism. Please don't do that. As a teacher, you should do all kinds of research, So I did a lot of research on masculinity studies. It's so difficult. Masculinity studies is not a rejoinder of feminism. It came as an independent field of study in the 1970s, mid-70s, when we were born. It came at that time. And in masculinity studies, they talk about the challenges of being a man. It's very difficult to be a man as well. It's not just difficult to be a woman. A woman can have her kinds of problems, like domestic issues can be there, workplace violence can be there, and financial issues, economic disempowerment, many things are there when it comes to the problems of women. But also men don't have any less of those problems. We expect men to be perfect in everything. We want a man to be a great father for their children, because the father is the role model for children. Then a great husband for the wife in every aspect, protecting her, doing everything for the wife. Then a great son, because after marriage the son cannot go anywhere, he has to stay with the parents. Though a woman usually, not always, usually goes to the husband's house. And then at the workplace, a man cannot take any excuses, maybe because there are so many social reasons. Everywhere a man has that kind of performance pressure. Even in intimate relationships, a man has the performance pressure, a woman doesn't have. So masculinity studies actually talks about the pressures, the challenges of being a man. When I read that, the character Kern came to my mind. It was so difficult to be Kern. He was born a Kshatriya, but he had to live the life of a Dalit. And then he was rejected by both the communities one by one. In the making of Karna, what he became at a later stage, Draupadi and Kunti, they had major contributions, negatively or positively, whatever you may decide. So I thought that in the making of a man, the character of a man, women have a very big contribution. You go to your household, the way you behave outside, the way you present yourselves outside as men, it has definitely something to do with the women folk at home. Your mother, your children, daughters, your wife, everybody, they have something to contribute to your life. So the peace, the happiness or otherwise of your life basically primarily also depends on the women folk at home. You will agree with me. So when I read those kind of literary discourses on masculinity studies, I thought I can take the character Kern. And then I wrote a poem as Kern. That book also has 42 cantos and a complete book, Karna, is under publication. It was very, very difficult. It was a challenge for me, sir, to think like Karna, because I am a woman. So thinking like Karna and writing like Karna was very difficult for me. In between, I used to forget. When I am Karna, I am writing, suddenly I become Nandini. Then I have to forget Nandini. Like T.S. Eliot would say, depersonalize yourself, the theory of impersonality. So you have to detach yourself. Your mind has to be a catalyst. So I had to make my mind a catalyst and become Kern, think like Kern, act like Kern and write Kern. So as a creative writer also, I have drained myself several times, but every time after burning and becoming one character and writing, when I was writing Sita Canto 24, when Sita goes back to the planet Earth, she says, please take me back. I don't want to give another fire baptism. When she goes back, I was writing, I was flooding with tears. I was crying and crying. It was difficult for me to see the pen, but I was writing like nosy and all that. I was crying. I get involved when I write. So, as a writer, as a poet, as a folklorist, as a researcher, as a teacher, and now as an administrator, I want to invest myself. I get invested in whatever I do. Probably that is why I have become a people's person. I used to be a very, very private person till I was very, very young. But later on when I joined IGNOU, the People's University, and I got into the public sphere as a writer, publishing book after book, and people doing PhDs on my writings. Very recently, many books came on my writings. One book came, you can see that on Amazon, The Creative World of Nandini Sahu. The best brains of the country, they have contributed chapters in that book, The Creative World of Nandini Sahu. And researchers, professors, Padma Shris, Padma Vibhushans have written those chapters, and I'm so humbled that people are reading my writings very carefully. They take my writings very, very seriously. Wherever I go, people love me, and I'm appreciated, I'm admired, and I'm also open to be criticized. If you find anything that needs to be ratified, that needs to be worked upon, please point it out. I'm always open for any kind of change. Change is the only spice of life, isn't it? So now coming to Hindi University, I have started comparative literature work. There is one lecture series. If you Google Hindi University YouTube series on comparative world literatures, you will find many, many YouTubes. We have started a lecture series where we are inviting many people, excellent scholars, and many people who are creative writers and researchers and professors. They are delivering lectures, and we put it in the YouTube. And I have proposed a department, as I already told you, a comparative world literatures department. We are planning to have 30 MA programs under that. And we are trying to spread our MA courses all over the world, create collaborations. We are trying to create convergence between distance education and face-to-face education, which is conventional education, so that we can have a distance education cell where we write and design the material, and we can have convergence and face-to-face classes where we teach our students. Then we are trying to create, placement cell for our students. We have a translation studies department, and the students who are doing MA program in the translation studies, they are well placed. They are getting placements in many institutions as translators. So if you need translators, please get in touch with me. If you need translators who can translate between Assamese, Bangla and Hindi and English, please get in touch with me. We can provide you excellent translators. We can give you a platform for publications, for research and pedagogy, for all kinds of work. I am in a position now where I can be instrumental in empowering the disempowered, helping the students, the youngsters to grow in life. Please allow me to be a part of your very beautiful state. I have long and deep association with Assam and all of the Northeast Indian states. I have taken them in my IGNOU courses. Now I am taking an MA in Assamese in Hindi University. I am going to open MA in Assamese as well. So I need your help. Thank you. The 22 Indian languages that I told, MA in Assamese will definitely be there. It's one of the very, very important courses. I need expertise from you people. I will get in touch with Dr. Dhurjati. He can provide me good names, who can be course writers, whose texts can be taken as a part of our syllabus. And we will teach the Assamese texts in Assamese, Hindi, Bangla and English. These 4 languages will be the primary languages for the time being. In future, if after 4 years, when I go back to IGNOU, if some other vice chancellor comes and they try to translate those to many other languages, they can do. But I think for me, these 4 years will be engaged in creating 30 MA courses, including Indian languages, foreign languages, tribal and folk languages, and also creating a placement cell, taking my faculty and staff and students to international platforms, and creating many more YouTube videos and lectures, and I will need help and support from each one of you. Thank you so much for your patient hearing. Namaskar.
Thank you, ma'am, for your illuminating speech. সঁচাকৈয়ে নন্দিনী সাহু মেমে যিটো সুন্দৰ ভাষণ দিলে আমাৰ সন্মুখত, বিশেষকৈ দুটা কথাই মোৰ মনোযোগ আকৰ্ষণ কৰিছে। এটা হ'ল ডিকনষ্ট্ৰাকশ্যন অফ চিটা, ইটাক কেনেকৈ কি নতুন পাৰ্চপেক্টিভত তেওঁ আলোচনা কৰিছে, আৰু তেখেতে কৈছে যে প্ৰতিগৰাকী মানুহৰ মাজত, আনকি পুৰুষসকলৰ মাজতো সীতাৰ উপস্থিতি তেওঁ অনুভৱ কৰে। দ্বিতীয় কথাটো ভাল লাগিছে যে লেংগুৱেজ এম্পাৱাৰ্ছ ইচ আদাৰ। লেংগুৱেজ কোনো ভাষাই আন ভাষাক ডমিনেট নকৰে, দমন নকৰে, অৱদমিত নকৰে। ভাষাই ইটোৱে সিটোক সবল কৰে, শক্তি দিয়ে। যি নহওক, বাইদেউ পুনৰ ধন্যবাদ জনাইছোঁ। আৰু এতিয়া মই সামৰণিৰ পৰ্যায়লৈকে আহিছোঁ। এতিয়া সভাপতি হিচাপে মই নিয়ম মাফিক দুটামান কথা ক'ব লাগে।